It started on a rainy Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago. The kind of morning where the city feels gray all the way down to the bones. Streets slick with rain, people rushing under umbrellas that barely shielded them from the drizzle. On the 15th floor of a nondescript office building, Simon Keller sipped his third cup of black coffee, staring at a spreadsheet that refused to make sense. Numbers never lied. That was his mantra. But this felt like a lie written in ink and secrecy. Simon was 34, meticulous, unremarkable in every way that didn't involve numbers. An accountant by trade, forensic by obsession. He worked for a corporate auditing firm that handled high-profile clients, companies whose names carried weight and whispered influence. Most days were tedious, cross-checking ledgers, auditing quarterly reports, catching misplaced decimals. But that morning, as he traced a series of transactions from a shipping conglomerate to offshore accounts, a pattern began to emerge. It wasn't just numbers. It was absences. Missing shipments, unreported losses, sudden employee terminations that didn't add up. And then, as Simon dug deeper, he realized the trail led to people, actual individuals who had vanished, some quietly, some with news coverage that faded as quickly as it appeared. A warehouse manager in Detroit. A junior analyst in New York who emailed her resignation and disappeared before the week ended. A driver in Ohio who never returned from a routine delivery. The ledger was vast, and Simon's stomach churned as he realized it connected them all. By the second week, Simon was obsessed. He worked late into the night, his apartment littered with spreadsheets, bank statements, and newspaper clippings. Each document felt like a step deeper into something he wasn't meant to see. He tried to rationalize it at first. Perhaps coincidences, perhaps administrative errors. But the more he traced the money, the clearer it became: someone, or something, was orchestrating these disappearances through financial channels. The ledger itself was cryptic. It wasn't just a record of transfers and withdrawals. Codes were embedded in account numbers, subtle annotations in the margins like shorthand. Simon called it the Black Ledger because that was what it felt like, a document that didn't just record money, it recorded secrets. Behind those secrets were names he'd never see in headlines, executives whose influence stretched from Chicago to Wall Street and beyond. Simon knew the danger. Everyone in his field did. Certain audits weren't meant to be scrutinized. Certain ledgers weren't meant to be understood. Corporate power wasn't just about profits, it was about control, about what could be hidden beneath the sterile lines of balance sheets. But the disappearances were human. And human lives demanded attention, even when the world looked away. He started small. He traced a series of transactions, a shell company in the Cayman Islands funneling funds through a network of subsidiaries before landing in a Chicago-based logistics firm. That firm employed hundreds, but 3 names kept appearing, people who had vanished over the past 6 months. Payroll records, tax filings, insurance claims, all pointed to an untraceable hand guiding their fates. Simon took notes obsessively. He created a visual map on his wall: cities, companies, dates, lines crisscrossing like a spider's web. A timeline that wasn't just financial, it was ominously human. One disappearance in St. Louis, 2 weeks later a transfer in Miami. A sudden audit in Los Angeles, coinciding with a missing driver in Phoenix. The ledger seemed to pulse in response to his scrutiny, guarding its secrets with an almost deliberate intelligence. He tried to involve someone. First, his firm. But when he casually mentioned his findings to a senior partner, the conversation ended abruptly. "Don't touch it," his partner said, not looking up. "Some ledgers aren't for our eyes, Simon. You want a career. Keep your curiosity in check." Simon's heart sank. He wasn't dealing with ordinary corporate oversight. He was dealing with something much bigger. Yet he couldn't stop. That night, he began encrypting his work, backing it up across multiple hard drives buried in different locations. He used aliases online to communicate with journalists, trying to verify whether these disappearances had been investigated. Almost nothing. Missing persons reports existed, but the connections Simon saw were invisible to everyone else. The ledger was a skeleton key, opening doors no one dared to unlock. Weeks passed, and paranoia settled in like a second skin. Unmarked cars trailed him. He began noticing the same faces in coffee shops, bus stops, lingering at intersections as he drove. He knew he was being watched. And yet, he continued. One evening, he contacted Julia Moreno, a reporter who had covered corporate crime before. She was skeptical at first, demanding proof Simon couldn't fully reveal. But he shared just enough: the pattern of transactions, the disappearances, the ledger's cryptic annotations. She agreed to meet him in a deserted diner on the outskirts of the city, a place where the owner knew her face and kept quiet. Julia was sharp, seasoned. She understood danger, the kind hidden behind polished boardrooms and untraceable wire transfers. As Simon laid out the ledger's map, she realized the scope of what they were looking at: dozens of disappearances over several years, all tied, indirectly, to a web of corporations wielding influence like a weapon. They dug quietly. Each lead was a trapdoor: executives insisting there were no missing employees, server farms denying transaction logs, lawyers threatening cease and desist notices before the ink could dry. The ledger defended itself, invisible but palpable. Then came the call from the first whistleblower. A former logistics coordinator, voice trembling, who had seen the ledger firsthand in a manager's office. He spoke of coded schedules that determined which employees would vanish, of clients complicit in orchestrating it, of falsified insurance claims erasing paper trails. Horrifying, almost unbelievable, but it confirmed Simon's fear: the black ledger wasn't just a record of money. It was a blueprint for abduction, disguised as bookkeeping. As Simon and Julia gathered more evidence, danger escalated. Apartments were broken into, nothing taken, nothing left behind. Cars were keyed, tires slashed. They traveled separately, used burner phones, encrypted emails, met in public places to exchange physical copies of the ledger. Each step forward was a gamble, each phone call a risk. They decided to go public. Not with the full ledger, but with the pattern, the disappearances, the implicated companies. News agencies were skeptical, executives denounced the claims, lawyers threatened lawsuits. But public interest surged. Questions were asked in boardrooms, city councils, congressional offices. Some companies quietly dissolved, others stonewalled. Yet much of the ledger's truth remained hidden, and some disappearances continued, invisible to the world. Simon became a ghost in his own city, moving constantly, his identity fractured across addresses and aliases. Yet he couldn't let it go. If he stopped, the ledger would win, not just over him, but over every missing person it had touched. In the end, the ledger was never fully exposed. Pieces leaked, investigations led to a few arrests, some convictions. But much remained buried, protected by wealth, influence, and fear. Simon vanished from the public eye, leaving behind traces suggesting he had taken the ledger and disappeared, as if he had become one of the shadows he had traced for years. The ledger itself remains. Cold, patient, silent. Waiting, marking the next line in its endless record of absence. Because power isn't just in the hands that write the checks. Power is in the hands that decide who is counted, and who is forgotten.